got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the major plan stealers in his hands. He's got the first-time offenders in his hands. He's got the licensed real estate agent in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the young dermatologist in his hands. He's got the bank loan officers in his hands. He's got the bad motorcycles in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Good evening, colleagues. Around town, around the globe, here we are on the 16th of January in the year of our Lord 2020. That's 2020. I'm Paul Colby. I'm your host for another special edition of Public Affairs, Public Access. You know, I've been doing this for years, bringing you the stories behind the stories behind the stories. And only in recent years has it become obvious to some of you that I have a terrific staff of crack investigators who do all of the dirty work. Let's just say the work that it takes to put together a situation or a setting like this, where you can be the benefit of things other people don't know. That's what's going to happen tonight. And for the second time in history of this kind of presentation, I've brought some of those crack investigators with me. That's because the last time I brought them, they suddenly decided they were, I think they said telegenic. I'm not sure what that means, but they seem to think they're telegenic. So they're coming with me tonight. And who am I talking about? Tom Foolery. Tom Foolery is here tonight. He is the acting Black Bean Professor of Political Anthropology at Balloon State University. He wasn't always. You may recall he used to work for one of our newspapers, one of our organs of truth. Anyway, Tom is the author of a bestseller, Why I Milked the Subway System for All It Was Worth, and I think it's been in the New York Times bestseller list for about 35 weeks already. Joining me also tonight, Leslie Forget. She is the managing director of the Pseudo Committee for Commentary on Human Non-Human Communications. And that is, in case you didn't know, that is a nonprofit agency with ties to the Professional Bowling Standards Advisory Group. They finance your operation, or they just like what you do?
Well, they definitely have some interest in our organization, what we do. They're somewhat closely tied to gaming strategies and whatnot. In fact, one of our practice modules you'll see up there in the background, one of our successful operations was developing communications with the feline community. And we...
Tom has written about the feline community. Chapter 2 of the book is just about the best I've ever read on the
Thank you.
Excuse me, I keep thinking in other words, but feline community, yes. Gymnasium is here again tonight. He is the interim chief spokesperson for the Department of Ancient Mysteries at the Consumer Prevention Laboratory, whatever that is, in Lathrop, Pennsylvania. And he is the former editor of the quarterly journal Firearms for Small Mammals, something I used to read religiously. Now, you've moved up in the world. You told me, Jim, you were never going to work for peanuts again, so I assume you're working for, what, cashews or?
Almonds, actually.
Almonds.
Almonds, yes.
In any case, these are some of my best investigators, and we have a lot to talk about tonight because here it is, 2020, top of this new era, and we're going to talk about several subjects. We're going to talk about the impeachment because you're all thinking about that. We're going to talk about some predictions for 2020. We're going to talk about some state and federal laws that are going to come into effect in 2020. We're going to talk about some of the things in the God knows how many trillions of dollars in the 2020 budget. And finally, we'll have to talk about the Super Bowl because everybody does this time of year. So let's go to the top of the chart, impeachment. You've been listening to the folks on CNN and CBS and ABC and NBC, and they tell you the usual stuff. But how about my people telling me some stuff that most people don't know? For example, this question of bathroom breaks. Jim, you've been following that closely, haven't you?
Yeah, I believe the Democrats are pushing for longer bathroom breaks, longer and more frequent bathroom breaks so that the Democratic presidential candidates can go out and give some sound bites on the way to and from the bathroom.
That makes a lot of sense. And of course, the senators are not able to speak during an impeachment proceeding, so if somebody had to go, I suppose they wouldn't be able to announce it, would they?
No, but most of them will probably sleep through the proceedings anyway, so I don't really think it's going to be much of an issue.
Okay.
We'll see.
The Chief Justice will be there, and I understand that one of the things he's going to have to do this time around, correct me if I'm wrong, Leslie, he's going to keep an eye on documents and testimony that's introduced because what?
Yes, the Chief Justice will be making rulings on whether certain documents and certain testimonies are true or false. In fact, I've heard that many of the networks covering the trial will be putting up polls indicating certain voting percentages of voters that believe.
So whether the voters think it's true or not, as opposed to whether the Chief Justice
Absolutely.
has an opinion. I see. Well, on this general question of fake news, because I think that's what you're getting at, I understand, Tom, that there's another rule that is being considered.
Yeah, so there's a proposal on the table that would prevent the president from creating another national crisis, say an overseas engagement. It's called the Achtung Reichstag rule, and of course it has opposition from the GOP.
Okay, well, those are some things I bet you didn't know, but the question you all have, I think, is who thinks the president's guilty, who thinks he's innocent? And the Quacker Bunsen poll just came out, last week, I think it was. This talks about, you know, it's easy to say this many are against and this many believe him or whatever, but it doesn't make sense unless you break it down by specific groups. For example, I was really surprised to hear how many retired shrimpers have already decided that the president is guilty. That jumped off the page at me, and I don't understand exactly why they took a poll for the members of the Vatican janitorial staff. It even says at the bottom of the chart that those people can't vote in U.S. elections. But anyway, this is all very interesting. Is there anything in this that surprises you?
I saw the retired shrimpers numbers, and interestingly enough, there was a poll of retired strippers, and oddly enough, it didn't add up to 100%, but they were split roughly half and half on. But the total was only 50%.
Well, I'm glad you unclothed that very important tidbit.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upstage you. Please proceed.
No. I mean, you're here, Jim, to upstage whoever at this table you can upstage. I mean, people working for cashews.
Almonds.
I'm sorry, almonds.
My body weight in almonds every 2 weeks.
Okay, well, and I respect that. I know I shouldn't.
Did you actually pick up your guitar career again? You're touring with the Allman Brothers.
That's a proposal at this point.
Well, there's only a couple of the Allman Brothers are still around.
Well,
really.
I may hook up with the Mark Allman Band, which I've played with before. So we'll see. But I really want to dedicate all my energy to my new position.
All right, Jim. I think you're nuts, but I've said that to you in private too. Yeah. So, anyway. let's talk about predictions for 2020, and we've got a lot of them. And I want to start at the top. The base that Trump has that never seems to expand or to retract. That base is very important to Donald, and what I understand is he is thinking in terms of converting it to a church. Now, I just recently saw this at a grocery store. I'm standing in line and look where the cheap journalism usually is are these new stickers that say, taking flack for the flock. Huh. And I said, so what is the flock? Then the other night on the internet, I'm just cruising around and I see this ad for a new armed congregation, apparently in my own neighborhood. This is a surprise to me. And they want to get together and pray, but not the way we normally pray. And then I'm driving around in the car this week, and what should I hear but some familiar gospel tunes on what is apparently going to be a new station, Hymn TV, and I think it's also a Twitter feed. Y'all know about that? I'll tell you what I heard. I'm driving around on I-10, and I hear "What a Friend We Have in Donald." I could sing along with it. I remembered the tune.
And I've heard a mighty fortress is our Senate Democratic or Republican majority.
Well, I haven't heard that yet, but it fits the profile of a new religious station, not like a Station of the Cross, but a new station. So we started digging deep, and I got to thank Tom for this. He got hold of a document, or several documents here. You know that Trump is always wanting to have less regulation, and his new congregation of worshipers want to have less regulation. So they were looking at the 10 Commandments and deciding which ones they might be able to adopt. For example, Second Commandment, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. And this handwriting, I think from the big boy, says, but everybody else is fair game. That sounds like our man. And then, thou shalt not kill, but there are a lot of things short of that. For example, you have your deep fakes and your intimidation and threats and so forth. They usually get the This surprised me. Number 6, thou shalt not commit adultery. And here he's saying, I'm assuming, no adults in the room is fine with me.
You know, I had two thoughts actually, going back to the 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill. I think it's interesting the role it's played in our society over the, decades, where probably children growing up with Army figures and G.I. Joe are being sort of indoctrinated, and it's now evolved to something more like, I think the other day I saw an ad for Play School's My First Target Recon Infrared Geolocating Rangefinder.
That would explain the emphasis, but not necessarily the odor, but certainly the. Anyway, there's some inferences to draw. This religion that we're talking about, I know that if we're going to have a new religion, that Rudy G, I've been calling him that for a while, Giuliani, will certainly want to have a role, maybe a pseudo-papacy type of role, something about the Holy Father, because he's just been visiting the Vatican lately. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. I've heard he plans, in fact, to assume the papacy, or the equivalent of the papacy, and Justice Kavanaugh is going to be one of the cardinals. But I believe Leslie has discovered that the church will be headquartered, in fact, in Kiev. Is that true?
Actually, I hadn't confirmed some of those reports, but I was going to inquire about the papal position. Is that anything similar to the missionary position?
No. This is more modern. This is more modern.
More modern than that.
Yeah, and even vegetables do this, or so I'm told. But
before we get off topic, I did want to say that I have heard it described as really, it's not just loosening, a slashing of norms at this point. And so, to me, considering well, considering the direction that he may be aiming, I think Rudy would make sort of a papal machete figure.
Well,
for us all.
that would certainly be a cut up, and he is a cut up. You know that. The one group that will probably want to join the church en masse, I guess is how you say it, would be the white nationalist people. They have a white nationalist house, and that was covered in the news. But Jim got a hold of one of their emails. And it's odd that they should talk about super sexy dance moves, but what they do say to the Big Donald is that our support for you in 2020 is semi-automatic. So that makes it sound like, to me, that we're talking about changing an empire into a church for tax reasons, tax benefits, and
I can certainly see that. That's
yeah. I think it can be broken down into the benefits or the penalties that will be in effect for certain denominations. Don't we have a chart about that, Mr. Producer? Yeah, we do. For example, the lapsed Catholics. This is curious. Any donations they make to the Loyal Family Sludge Fund, and I think that's sort of like a slush fund, can be deducted on line 26, I forget what that is, or for line 41. But there's a penalty for non-contribution. They have to do 50 laps around the 4 embassies. Not so bad for the Holy Bowlers. I mean, they get penalized for not converting to the new religion, and the horse worshippers, is it whisperers or worshipers in this case? The benefits are negligible, except that if you give a big donation, like 1-point-something million, you can qualify for nominal sainthood, which is a lot like statehood in a religion like that. So
That's a good incentive program.
it is an incentive program. There's nothing else we can call it. And before we leave this subject, I think that Mr. Trump has been paying attention to the problems the royal family is having, because you know what he wants to name the new religion? Do you know?
No.
The Loyal Family.
Oh, that sounds like a show I'd watch on Netflix.
Yeah, I think you did. I mean, I saw it on Netflix. Anyway, that's one prediction we've got. Trump's religion. Another one, journalism might become a felony, and that's because bad news is not appreciated these days, especially by the current government. And anytime you have bad job numbers, you're talking really about a capital offense, right? Mm. Isn't that what you found?
Yes.
So the other side of this is some of the bad news these days comes from these social media networks that will just print anything, whether it's true or not, and they rarely identify their sources. So we are being told that Facebook is going to reveal sources, but only for some bad news. And sometimes I think it's just sources for vitamin B6 or sources for vitamin C also. And that makes me think a lot about vegetables, because vegetables are in the news lately. People's eating habits are always a subject for discussion in this format. I know a lot of you eat strange things, but they're not on my table.
That was the lean and hungry days.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I do enjoy my gax.
Yes. But
I'm a fan of Rudy Biggers myself. I find they're very nutritious.
All right. Well, you see, we all have vegetables that we can live with, but I think that what you're noticing a lot lately, and I saw a report. The report is it was in the Cheney Era Co-Pilot, which is a small newspaper I just check once in a while to see what those guys are thinking. It's asking whether you get enough laughing vermipods in your diet. And laughing vermipods are strange to look at and hard to cook with. But they're not the only ones like that. For example, I just want to show you some of my favorites, and they can be tasty. You may not know or be very familiar with, at least in a culinary sense, the asparagus, but these are asexual. There's not a boy asparagus and a girl asparagus. But
No, I've tried.
What?
I've tried.
Yeah. They respond the same way, no matter how you approach them. But these are a great source of tubulescence, and they're not that hard to work with. I mean,
No, I
my-
have
my-
them all
yes.
over my kitchen.
Yeah.
I use them all the time because my table's unbalanced.
yeah, sometimes
I
they'll
prop it
just
up.
jump.
My ex-wife was a huge fan of those, although oddly enough they're more in the bedroom than they were in the kitchen in that case. I was-
Speaking of foul smells, go on.
The mobilufa, these you don't see. I mean, I see them in my backyard. That's why I started eating them. And I wasn't even sure they were a vegetable because they move around a lot. Most of your vegetables don't have the same advanced locomotion. These things are abundant in, I think, in parts of Kansas and in the wetlands everywhere, and places where people don't wear shoes. But I use these almost every day now, just because there's so many in the backyard.
Seems like it has a good texture to it.
It has a good texture, but sometimes it recoils if you treat it
But
improperly.
they can actually be trained. I don't know if you knew that. They're kind of a hybrid of an animal and a vegetable, and they can be trained.
I could
to
tell
retrieve.
that from some of the conversations we've had. I mean, they go off base quite a lot, but so do the blighted humpdills. At first, I resisted these. You know,
The spikes are very intimidating.
the spikes, yeah, and they're not that tasty either. I usually just pull them out, and once you do, then it's pretty. And sometimes I'll pull out the pipe stem. They're hard to get out, but in any case, I've found that these are widely sold on the internet under various names like Chester flakes or heated warbles. But they're becoming very common. And why all of this vegetable topic at this particular point in time? Well, I'll tell you what it is. A lot of people are just eating less meat these days. And because there's the popularity of Beyond Meat and the Impossible Burger, well, some of your meat packing operations, they have just replaced the alternate products. They have like Behind Meat.
That sounds like that's the part of the horse that you really want nothing to do with.
Yeah, it's some part of
I
the.
figured you could get behind me.
All right, or the unlikely burger doesn't even pretend to know what's in that. But here's the point: with people eating less meat and people worrying about the pollution from plastic bags, there's a new trend I've seen, and I bet you heard that Grubhub is changing its name to Clubhub.
Why is that?
And that's because, this is what Leslie told me, they are picking up food. They're not delivering it. And this is a lot of uneaten meat.
Well, there are a lot of starving DJs in Ibiza, so South Spain it's a hot spot.
Well, on the wider scale, though, I feel like it's this whole movement and all its offshoots is just our obsession with, as you say, wanting to use less plastic bags, more interest in eating less meat and stuff. But there is a school of thought that says that wanting to do better practices is almost as good as actually doing them. So I think we need to stop.
Well, I've actually smelled some of the meat bags. I mean, you can't miss it. It's not like plastic. You can, and so whatever the intention was, the effect is pretty clear.
I think excellent point, Leslie, that thinking these days is every bit as good as doing.
Many times we don't even need to enact
Actually,
change.
right.
We just need to want to change.
Yes.
Well, all right, okay, that's
My
what
therapist is on board with that.
I think that's what we humans think. But you know, right now we're going to have competition because another thing I predict, and a lot of people are predicting, is that horses are going to become some of our key thinkers in this next little while. And I'm not talking about, you know, these silly horses you saw on TV years ago that spoke 2 or 3 sentences. I'm talking about horses that are dealing in cutting-edge science. For example, in the current edition of Scientific Ambiguity, I saw that many of today's influential horse thinkers reject the Strasberg-Hopsel model of transformations. And then that just pushed me, yeah, like I say, what an impressive volume that is.
I, for one, can't wait for the Gallup polls.
Well, some of them are coming in already.
I've heard there's going to be a new cabinet-level position that's called the Secretariat of Science. That will be staffed by a horse with several equine assistants as well. So we're definitely headed in a interesting it's a brave new century.
I saw something about that in the emerging role of horse thinking in a post-Donald economy, and that's a book by Impetua Shank, or is it Shunk?
I think I saw that over at the Barnes and Noble store recently.
Yeah, that's where I guess you would expect to find it. I think it's a little pricey. I mean, to learn what horses are thinking shouldn't cost you $30. But as you mentioned in that Gallup poll, another one that is a favorite of mine is galloping luminous. No, I can't believe I can't believe I read this. Anyway, it's on a luminous halftime on 750 a day. Only a horse would be able to come up with something like that. But I know that Donald Trump is keeping an eye on horse thinking, so we don't want to be the last ones in line when it comes to understanding the next sequence of public events. That's all I can say. Trump
certainly President Trump and is very familiar with certain parts of the horse being the possible new food source, the horse end. He's
behind meat. Yeah.
Behind meat, yes.
Behind meat.
His closest friends are definitely fall into that category, I would say, without wanting to be too offensive.
Well, and I think he needs to be careful about that too, because I've heard rumor that Putin is very close with many of his.
Well, you know, he rides a thinking horse.
That was a bear.
Huh?
That was a bear.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. It was a bear. Well,
he's I believe hasn't he taken President Trump out for many horse rides, or is that
It's
just
bareback riding.
Yeah, bareback. I think
bareback.
Putin.
Yeah.
I think Putin and Trump are familiar, very
Famous for the
very
bareback.
familiar with
They're
bareback,
following
yes.
in the hoof steps of the new line of thought. But political traction committees are not moving forward. I think they're trying to move backward. I read recently in the Virginia Vacillator about some rulings on gerrymandering. This is because I guess gerrymander is going to retire now, but the whole point of Gerrymander's illustrious career was that he preached the virtue of incumbency, and I think he was talking about a position.
I think I'm afraid that much of his opinions, he was constantly crossing the line societally.
You're right. I can't, I mean, I could deny, but I can't deny it.
Didn't he play wasn't he the star of Leave It to Beaver? Was that gerrymander, or was that? I believe that was, but I could possibly be wrong.
In a parallel universe, he's still doing very well. But you know, so anyway, what I was trying to get to here is that it looks like the next political party is not going to be an official party, and it's not going to be independents. It's going to be the incumbent party. These people can, where our Republicans and Democrats per se can't seem to get things together and agree on anything, at least the incumbents can say it would be nice to stay around for this new era.
I think it's
of
incumbent
horse-
upon us as a population to think carefully before we go down that road. That's I think, Leslie, you can chime in here, but I think if we go down the road of everything being about incumbents, that's not a sacrilegious position to be in.
More from incumbents. I know you were talking about this before we went on air, that Elizabeth Warren, for example, mentioned that she was heavily influenced by a new book, The Tales from the Wine Cave. That's different from the Braying Cave. But this one has contributions for a lot of today's great thinkers, Laverne Prolax, Estuvia Stadium Box. That's a horse, isn't it? I think.
Of a different color.
Yeah.
different
Rogers Jim Biffy. Anyway, the Wine Cave has a lot of complaints from a lot of different quarters in our political spectrum. And I think that's why so many people are reading it right now. And that's why I say political traction committees will continue exerting their influence as long as the extreme court rules with them. All right?
Isn't one of those authors a hologram, in fact?
Several of them are holograms, and we are getting to an area where we're gonna have to talk more about holograms. But let me get one thing off the table before we leave the predictions. I think free speech, from what you guys are telling me, free speech is going to be supplemented with paid speech.
That's
And thanks to Tom, we have a little segment here that comes out of a new when you're on social media and you sign these things, you don't even read them. You know, you just sign and say yes, I agree.
Yeah.
But here we have the language on free speech. It says that members can speak freely, and it's in parentheses, for 10 minutes, after which there will be a nominal charge. I think that's $1.50 a minute going forward. And that's not just Facebook. You were telling me
Twitter is going to start charging after 10 characters. You're going to have to pay. But I think we're getting used to that. I'm familiar with paying for conversations by the minute. So I think society will.
Well, and I think
that's
they're relying on that familiarity to launch more streaming services. That's a trend that's coming up right now. Is
That
streaming
was chapter
services for
3 of your Subway narrative,
actually,
I think.
And it featured Jim for the fact that goes into greater depth, and I realize you hopefully read the book talking about the paid per minute and streaming are both parts of your hobbies.
Yes.
We might need to do a whole show on Jim's hobbies sometime, but I don't think we want to get there tonight because some people haven't eaten dinner yet.
Plus, this is a family-oriented show. So.
That's right, and it's ahead of dinner time. Okay, those are some predictions. But what about things that we know will happen? In other words, in 2020, there are some new federal and state laws, and these things go into effect already. First one involves the Space Force, and I've been trying to figure out just what the Space Force is. Look at that picture we've got. The National Security Agency is going around behind the Space Force and taking pictures of what they do. What do you think the Space Force is doing? Because I thought they were going, into the upper atmosphere or to some planet, or at least working on our satellites. But it looks like they're just making space by knocking down things that were already sitting somewhere.
That's my understanding. That is what the Space Force is all about.
Creating space.
Creating space.
Well, and my first thought looking at this was that it was going to be a new show on TLC, Trading Spaces, or Trading Space Forces.
I think we could get to the bottom of it if we analyze the form. Leslie, you got this for me, and I don't know who you talked to, but we have an application form people who want to be in the Space Force have to fill this out. Some of the questions are pretty bizarre, if you ask me. Like, under ethical constraints, this man or woman said, or maybe it's non-human applicant.
It's most likely candidates at this
Yeah, it
point.
says they will not mistreat armadillos, and they only lie when drinking. I mean, who would recruit people like this for what? Would
Clearly, a Russian bot is clearly filling out that application. I think there's no doubt that
filling out the application?
that the application process has been hacked. That's there's a secret server in Ukraine where they store fake Space Force applications, and they dribble them out one at a time.
Well, and Jim, that's exactly why we need such nonprofits as the Human Non-Human Communication Research, because going forward,
your people are saying that, and this echoes what Bernie and Elizabeth were arguing about. Can a robot be president? And I think you seem to be grooming some of them.
I feel like it's inevitable, and instead of trying to shy away from change, we should try to understand it. However, it was disappointing. I believe Warren's comments could be perceived very
anti-droid,
speciesist.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, non-humans are people too. I think people forget that.
Exactly.
Well,
we need to treat them ethically.
Not human.
Yeah.
Potentially, they are. And that's why...
And haven't we already had a robot president, I believe?
Yes, we did.
The second Bush.
Vice President, I believe, Gore, wasn't it?
Perhaps it was Vice
I
President Gore.
I think it was President Cheney, but...
It could have been more than one.
Yeah, well,
it's
they are.
an infestation. I think.
They've only recently come
They've
out
sprayed
of
the White House,
the closet more.
All right, well...
They're
while
all over
we're-
the world. I mean,
Look, while we're talking about identities, human and otherwise, I think that leads us to the discussion of another state law. Well, actually, several states have new laws with regard to identification cards that you have to carry. The first one here, when I saw this, the first thing that jumped out at me, other than that the man lives on Sledgehammer Road in West Collard, and it says Sledgehammer. I remember we were talking about the sludge funds of the... But anyway, what jumped out at me was that he is identified there as a, well, where did that hand come? As a potentially dangerous voter. And I suppose if you support the U.S. Constitution in this day and age, you are just painting yourself into a corner. Or at least you're identifying...
This is the first step in a fully justified campaign to, in fact, imprison anyone that supports the U.S. Constitution. So the first step in solving that problem is you have to identify the potential dangerous voters that support the U.S. Constitution.
Now
after that, you can round them up and put them in the internment camps.
But we have several constitutions, right? Because the present occupant of the White House seems to be working with a different constitution than the rest of us.
Well, he has a copy that was personally handed down to him from the Knights Templar, and that's kept in the White House.
Oh,
in a secret, right next to a secret room where they keep servers.
The Holy Grain that a lot of these horses are.
The throne room, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Golden throne.
The drone. I thought it was the drone room where from which they launch our attacks on. For example, I understood that the real thing that happened last week was that M&M. There was an M&M attack on our embassies, and it's okay to be a white nationalist, but a white rapper can be especially dangerous overseas. So but I digress. Animals are also, and we're talking about human and non-human, and we're talking about mammals. Jim, you used to...
I was the editor of the Firearms for Small
Yes,
Mammals.
you were, and here we see identification, in this case for a pool badger, who is identified as being robotic. Now, I would have thought a pool badger is just a mammal. Now you're telling me human, non-human. We also have non-human,
non-human, non-human.
But
I think
mammalian violence is a real problem in this country, and so that's, I now regret my support of
the millions.
arming small mammals, because in fact your cat is trying to kill you. So if you give your cat a gun, that's probably not a wise choice.
It's problematic because it kind of calls to mind the 1992 Million Small Mammal March. And it doesn't surprise me.
Oh, and there were not nearly enough porta-cans, as I remember.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of newspaper set out around the Capitol.
Oh, right.
It doesn't surprise me, though, this initiative to get ID and credentials for small animals as state and local initiatives. I mean, I have heard that it's very difficult when you think about it. It's one thing to try to smuggle a small animal across the border, but I mean, getting a rhinoceros in the back seat of a 1990 CRV, let alone carrying.
It's a messy situation.
I mean,
I
trying to
can see.
clench to hold one in your rear end doesn't
Or
work
especially
either.
And
too,
I thought we
if
weren't
you're like
I thought we weren't going to discuss my hobbies at this.
I'm sorry, we have strayed.
Let's leave our
We've
hippopotami.
strayed. Chapter 4.
Leave hippopotami out of this, please. No.
Okay, let's go where voter registration leads us, because that's next. I mean, we've talked about identification, and most of the time when you're talking about IDs these days, it's to keep people from voting. So the first thing, before we talk about the various state laws that go into effect controlling voting, I just want to point out that Trump and his base, that base is about 38 to 40% and never gets any bigger. And if Trump is going to win in 2020, he knows he has to have more Trump voters. So first we have a religion, but then we also have the use of holograms.
You say that his base is not expanding, but I've seen pictures of many people in his base, and trust me, they seem to be expanding at a rapid rate.
They're eating a lot of that behind meat.
Oh,
I think
be
that's what it is. But you noticed that in that article that I was trying to summarize here a little bit, which also points out that it's got a story about the West Collared man who's a rapper who got jailed for advocating the rule of law. But anyway, I don't want to get off the subject, but using these holograms would make it possible for Trump to expand his base. But
Well, that would fall in line, since, as we know, all of President Trump's wives were in fact holograms. So he's been a fan of holograms from way back
right.
when.
Well, and this is
and-
where he has an advantage against the Democrats, because Trump and his base have long had a campaign to embrace unrealities.
And serial monogamy, I believe. But I'm not sure about that.
Does that contain sugar? Serial monogamy?
Fake sugar.
That,
sugar?
I've told you before that some things are being advertised that aren't what they are, but people are eating them anyway, and I think I demonstrated that. But New Jersey, what is the bad news about people in New Jersey? I mean, we know Trump wants to expand his base. He also wants to reduce other people's bases who might be voting against him.
Well,
New Jersey?
In New Jersey, you can only vote when wearing a raincoat now, and I believe that's what they call flash voting.
And is that weather related? I mean, you can only you wear a raincoat even on sunny days. You
Flash
do
voting.
you-
It's
yes.
situational.
okay? What about?
I've heard that there's a high risk of exposing voters that wear raincoats.
There is some concern along those
Well,
lines.
yeah, that's for the cable channels. Like I say, this is a dinner time show.
I believe
adults-
HBO will do the
adults-
documentary.
I did Boston.
What about-
I did Utah. I was just going to get to
Utah, yeah, that's curious.
You're allowed to have 17 votes over the course of your life. So you can have, if you use all 17 votes.
All of them this year, if you want.
Yeah, you can use them all this year. You can spread them out the course of your. But there is a proposal in the Utah legislature to change that so you can have the number of votes you get in your lifetime is equal to the number of your wives.
Yeah, it's the take a wife, leave a wife initiative. The president's already, he's getting there.
That's not leave no wives behind? Is that an initiative or?
I also thought Texas was toying with the idea. I don't know the current status, but you would either have to vote in a public library or you would have to sing part of the national anthem backwards.
Is that the Texas national anthem or the?
That's
United
what
States?
confused me about it, because the Texas national anthem is sung backwards, except at halftime.
Or
I
when
thought this was a throwback to Sammy Davis Jr., felony and bribery, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
two popular crimes I'd like to see. Yeah, well, no, I don't think that's it at all. But maybe in a parallel reality, as I said before. This idea here of AI voting. Okay, it's called an autofill ballot, and this, I think, is happening in Arizona. And the idea here is you fill out a questionnaire, your responses to 3 or 4 questions, like, do you want to protect orphan eggs and things like that? And you answer these questions, 3 or 4 questions, and then it fills out the ballot for you.
I don't think that's going to get much traction, boss, because I think the wave of the future, and I think it's probably already occurring, is people will simply say, Siri, who should I vote for? And then Siri will actually fill out your ballot.
Well, we've mentioned before that...
that's leading to another big issue with labor management, because it's coming to light how often we overly rely on non-humans and there is not appropriate compensation for that.
Yeah,
Well,
there are
how
a lot
would they?
of lodge complaints from, as well, Alexa and Cortana and all these virtual entities that listen to what
Alexa
you're-
works 24/7 and doesn't even get dental care.
Indeed.
Well, they're not hanging out at the water cooler. That's what I say about a lot
They're
of
hanging out next to your fridge.
Well, okay. Another thing, in some states, robocalls are going to be limited this year, and that means that you can fill out the form that the state sends you, and you can say, yes, I'll take these calls, but I don't want like this one that you dug up, Tom. Here, this person was interested in robocalls about offers to buy up various internal organs or selling their identity, he or she, to the CIA.
Is there still that epidemic of several years ago of stolen kidneys? Is that still an ongoing crisis? Or?
Not at the water cooler.
Not for me.
No. The other thing, these robocalls they won't be stopped, but they might be slowed down because and I was looking at the Business Watchdog just this month talking about an overseas robocall ring that got fined $100. And they were promoting one of those meat bag schemes that we were talking about.
That was clearly based in Ukraine, correct? I believe it was.
No, it's not your crane. It was my crane. Okay. But anyway, a couple of other changes in law I don't understand. Women are going to be allowed to drive in several test areas. Can anybody explain that?
Well, you have to first, put the key in the door and then get the lock up and sit.
Okay,
I believe it stems from President Trump, his infatuation with all things Saudi, and he is a favor of emulating anything the Saudis do. And
and he
recently
probably
let 2 women drive, and he and his cohorts, none of them actually know any women, so they don't realize that women, in fact, have the right to drive.
Got it.
And have been driving for decades.
Sometimes it's just an oversight. Here's another one. Some states are going to make Christmas in July official. I think it's 9 states. Well, that would be interesting. I guess it would be a benefit to the economy.
I'm in favor. I'm in favor because I already thought we had moved it. I've started my Christmas shopping in January often.
It does make the declaration of which Friday is Black Friday becomes a bit problematic.
That's what I was thinking, that it causes a problem.
But it does increase the overall spending in the economy, and we all know the economy is driven by consumer spending.
Look at this. He keeps trying to sneak this one up. Get it? I want it. Yeah. No more private footwear in the Carolinas. This is a new trend about mandatory shoe rental. I don't understand it.
I believe Tom has an insight into that.
Yeah, well, that's just the effect of big bowling ball in the southeast. Just
Oh,
effective
yeah.
lobbying.
How did
Well,
I
that-
not?
I mean, and Leslie, you should, as familiar as you are with the bowling industry, perhaps you can speak to the.
They are, we do have
you
ties
said there were
to the
certain things
bowling
that-
standards.
Yeah, that you weren't going to
advisory.
get into tonight, and that I should warn you if we got too close to the.
We're legally unable to comment on these
Thank
standards.
you. Thank you very much. There's some more consumer privacy legislation, but I understand it's not what I thought it would be. We have that, yeah, the new issue of Consumer Rumor is talking about it. And I guess what they're saying is that corporations can keep private the list of the consumers they have sold these bogus goods to.
Actually, I think that might be a misspelling. I believe it's consumer piracy is the issue.
Oh, the consumer piracy law.
Pirates have long been a neglected group of people. Do not target pirates, and they have their money is just as good as anybody else's money. So I believe this is an effort to bring pirates into the consumer economy.
It's a forgotten constituency.
Yes.
It's
So
a cutthroat
someone
business.
like retired shrimpers are in the same boat.
Yeah, and the recently divorced engineers, I guess.
And they're all
Well,
in the same boat.
they're that's a troubled group. I can tell you.
Well,
that.
I know they don't wear shoes. That's what I don't get. The amateur neurosurgeons, those people don't even stand at the water cooler. It's like they don't drink water, and I'm not sure they're human. I mean, you would know that, but.
So how many people are in that?
They are excellent at rocket surgery. I mean, I've known several rocket surgeons.
Well, you know, people are always saying it's not rocket science, but actually rocket science is kind of at the baseline. I mean, rocket science, you take some solid fuel, you heat it up, and you shoot the thing. I mean, rocket science is not rocket science. Quantum mechanics is. I think that's why horses are becoming the leading thinkers. They're not wed to these other, and they're not actually wed. They don't believe in.
Animal
Well,
husbandry.
Yeah.
speaking of quantum mechanics, I mean, there is the famous Schrodinger's horse, which is neither
Right,
in the
right.
box nor outside.
It's in a box
it's in the
or
stable
not in a
or
box.
It's in the stable or outside the
To
stable.
the contrary, it's starting to
Both
sound
are
like we've got a
true
lot of
at
people
the
in
same
this
time.
boat. I'm not quite understanding. So we have the retired shrimpers, the pirates, the Schrodinger's horse, the rocket surgeons, and they're all in the same boat as you referenced previously.
Well, it's kind of like Noah. And there's
a
also
biblical story.
two of them because under the new Trump doctrine, each one is holographically duplicated. So that anyway, let's move. One last thing about these. Before I quickly get to the budget, we'll have to zoom through that. But naming rights for national parks, that's changed up. You're not going to see the Grand Canyon anymore. You're going to see the Amazon National Park. And actually,
Or, for example, even shiprock in native territories, I think, is going to, by public vote, it's going to be Shippy McShiprock.
Yeah, that was an unexpected winner.
2020, what's in the budget for 2020? Let me just break it down real quick because we have more to talk about. One thing is criminal justice reform and what it comes down to. You would think that's a good idea. Apparently, it's a proposal to bail out white-collar criminals if they behave in prison. Y'all in favor of that?
Behaving in prison? Do whatever you have to just survive.
That's what I thought.
But
Secondly,
what kind of behavior are we talking about?
misbehavior.
Okay.
You know,
I'm not
she,
familiar with.
weren't you
Is that one
crowned?
of the retired?
Misbehavior,
Is she
the-
one of the retired strippers?
Yes, yes.
Say,
I thought you would
crowned
recognize her.
misbehavior
Yes.
in prison.
All right.
Again, my
Sec-
hobbies.
Yes. Eliminating the State Department. They've cut all the money except $44,000. I think all they want to do is keep the lights on, period. Get rid of the people. Well,
Well,
am I not surprised?
The people is what's been gumming up the work.
The non-human.
Yeah,
Next thing.
the human.
Next thing. This is interesting. You can get tax breaks for using your home as a detention center. I found this in one of those home entrepreneur magazines, and it sounds like a pretty good idea. You get back in credits almost as much as you spend for something like this.
It's one of those
When I was-
get-rich-quick schemes, right?
right.
I've seen some flyers around for that.
Well, actually, when I was married, my home functioned much like a detention center, so I can see that that would be a very viable option and an excellent way to subsidize your income.
That's when you were crown misbehavior.
Okay, enough of his bad habits. Last thing I want to mention, there is seed money in the 2020 federal budget if you want to become a nuclear power. You can read it yourself there. I mean, they sell a whiz-bang starter kit. I mean, you've told me, Jim, that in most of the third world countries, they're preferring like armored tanks or Apache helicopters. But a lot of people want to be nuclear powers, and these deals that you have online right now in conjunction with the federal tax credit, some of them you can even get a BZ-10 controller, which I think is kind of a delivery.
That's very advanced technology.
It is.
I'm surprised.
It makes it work. I mean, what if you have a nuclear weapon and you can't really turn it on or off, you know?
Well, availability is increasing these days, particularly through non-human functions such as Amazon. You can get anything through Amazon.
Okay.
But a BZ-10, I thought
Oh, yeah.
up to BZ-8 was available, but a BZ-10.
We've only got a little time, so let's do mention the Super Bowl. First of all, everybody is always paying attention to the commercials at the Super Bowl, and this year, I think the Swillmaster the Swillmaster commercial is going to be a big hit because on the Supreme Court now, we've got a guy who really likes beer. So this is Brett Kavanaugh's favorite beer, as far as I am told. Not only that, people are always interested in what commercials we don't get to see because NFL football, that big conglomerate, doesn't like to see certain things used as commercial ads during the Super Bowl. For example, there was a spot for no cruelty eggs. And I'm a big fan of no cruelty eggs. The only ones I eat are those that were abandoned. You know, the hen wouldn't even sit on them. And the coal mine owner's plea for civility, I guess that was just too controversial for today's sporting figures. But the other thing that people pay attention to, in addition to the commercials or the commercials they don't get to see, is the halftime entertainment. And originally they wanted to have an Eminem attack on our embassies, but he said he was busy. So instead, what we have is a presentation of a vase from North Korea. And you've got a picture of it right there. You can see it's got an embroidered slogan on the side there. It says, "Good luck, America." And then there's a BZ-10 controller. I'm not sure.
Well, the North Koreans have access to BZ-10 controllers.
I think
quite ominous.
we just started.
Well, they shop on Amazon.
Yeah, everything is out there if you want to pay for it. I mean, just ask the people who eat.
Or the non-people.
Or the non-people who are eating a lot more behind meat, or some of our favorites like, some of our favorites that we cook all the time.
Forgive me for interrupting, but was one of the commercials that they're not going to allow to air was that legal service that prepared, what was it prepared the detached subpoenas, correct?
Yeah, detachable subpoenas.
Yes, so there's...
We won't be seeing that. But I'll tell you what, we will be seeing you again, not right away, but in the not too distant future. And anytime there's a lot of news to talk about, we'll be here to talk about it. We do it because we have to, not because we're getting paid, except for Jim, who is worth his weight in almonds yes. Now. We like to reach you people, and Leslie likes to reach the non-people, and Tom likes to bring me the news in the form of documents. that we purloined. Bye-bye until we're back again.